President Paul Kagame, current chair of the African Union Authority and President of the Republic of Rwanda, President Alassane Ouattara, President of the Republic of La Côte d'Ivoire, Laureate and former President Pedro Pires, former President Mary Robinson, former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, Dr. Musa Mohammed, Chairman of the African Union Commission, Dr. Salim Ahmed Salim, Chair of the Prize Committee of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, the board and members of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, participants of the Mo Ibrahim Governance Weekend, friends, greetings to all of you. President Paul Kagame, thank you for your generous support for this weekend's program. As I look around at Rwanda's development today, it is light years away from the conditions that existed when we led the UNDP roundtable for the country in 1994. We all take to heart the following words from your radio broadcast a few weeks ago. You said, "What we are doing here in Rwanda is not a miracle, nor it is impossible anywhere. It is simply the commitment of an entire nation, especially Rwanda youth and women." I applaud your steadfast vision and your leadership and the implementation of that vision. I commend you and your colleagues in the government and the private sector for the many innovations introduced in Rwanda. Africans have a lot to learn from one another. Many of the solution providers are here in this room tonight. To my dear friend, Mo Ibrahim, I believe that when historians reflect upon Africa's transformation, they will note that the 2006 establishment of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and its governance index, measuring leadership based upon its impact upon the well-being of a population, was a vital inflection point for our continent. Many of our countries are driving for the ideals defined in the Charter of the Foundation. Progress is uneven, but undisputably evident. As many leaders, myself included, have benefited from your direct approach and straight talk. I'm honored to be this year's recipient of the Mo Ibrahim Prize for Achievement in African Leadership. I believe this distinction and receive it on behalf of the many women and men who helped to navigate the profound complexities of the post-conflict country that is Liberia. As the first woman to receive this award, it is my hope that women and girls across Africa will be inspired to break through barriers to push back the frontiers of possibilities. Where there's a first, there will be a second, and a third, and a fourth. I'm grateful that the Mo Ibrahim Foundation sought to emphasize the post-conflict consolidation of Liberia's democracy under my 2 terms in office. Indeed, my most proud accomplishment is that after decades of violent conflict, the power in Liberia today rests where it should, with the people grounded in the rule of law and upheld by institutions. We take great pride that Liberia, as was mentioned by Dr. Salim Ahmed Salim, was the only country to improve in every category and subcategory of the Ibrahim Index of African Governance, a testament to all those who served in my government. We must remember that it is not that long ago when Liberia was considered a pariah state. Decades of ruinous civil and regional war upended our democratic institutions, decimated our infrastructure, deprived a generation of educational and economic opportunity, and undermined the moral fabric of our society. But from the ashes of war, we rebuilt. We transformed the economy from a growth rate of less than 0 to more than 8.7% average until 2013, when the country was devastated by the Ebola virus. We survived that shock and returned to a trajectory of progress. Today, Liberia's public institutions have the capacity to respond to the needs of its citizens through decentralized county service centers. Infrastructure has been repaired and restored, and roads now connect urban centers and farmers to markets. With the increasing provision of electricity, potable water, and new technologies, cities and towns are bustling with life, creativity, powered by the country's youth. More importantly, friends, with your support, this August, the resilient people of Liberia will celebrate 15 years of uninterrupted peace. Yet, Liberia remains a fragile state. Institutions are still young and being tested, and resources remain scarce. Nations in a state of fragility, particularly post-conflict nations, need special attention and support. We ask that supporters and partners remain focused on Liberia so the country can continue its emergence as a post-conflict success story. Dear friends, I am 6 months shy of my 80th birthday. God has granted me many blessings. Among them, a long and healthy life, and a cadre of family and friends which have carried me through life's trials and tribulations. God has also bequeathed upon me a restless spirit, one that is never fully satisfied, always believing that things can be better. For Liberians, for Africa, for people in poverty, for women and girls around the world. And now, after 8 decades, I have come to realize that this is an impatience which at certain times in my life felt to be an unrelenting burden. It's actually a gift, a great treasure. I'm convinced that this restless spirit, in part, which drove me to public service and like a wind against my back, propelled me forward toward dreams I had yet even to visualize. I submit that this is the same sense of disquiet and impatience that I share with Mo, with President Kagame, with the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and most of you in this audience. I submit that it is a restlessness that took hold of our fallen sister, Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Giving her the fiercest of courage to stand up against the apartheid state, despite the imprisonment of her husband, and in the face of physical and psychological abuse. Her indomitable spirit will continue to drive me through my remaining years. Speaking of women of unyielding strength, among those in this audience is Lucia Masali Yala. She was my cellmate during several months of confinement in a military prison in 1985. Her body was brutalized by soldiers, but her soul remained unscathed. From that shared trauma, we formed a friendship which has endured for over 30 years. Lucia, a young university student at the time, please stand up and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you. Looking back, it seems like every day I was fighting for something or someone. The right to be heard and to be taken seriously. The right for a society to have free speech and enjoy fundamental human rights. To end the deprivation of the Liberian people. To establish peace and build democratic institutions. To create jobs, expand livelihoods, and offer basic social services. To educate the girl child, to stop the deadly Ebola virus, and to oversee the first peaceful democratic transition of power in Liberia for over 70 years. And so, I stand before you today, an imperfect leader from a complex post-conflict society on a continent of uneven progress and during a time of global uncertainties. As I look toward my twilight years and my closing chapter of restlessness, I would like to leave with you some of the lessons that the Liberian people have taught me, as well as their implications for the consolidation of democracy on the continent. Liberia's progression toward democratic values, as exemplified by the successful 2018 transition, is reflective of Africa's quest for democracy. It is a continuum of the continent's struggle for liberation and freedom. As Nelson Mandela said in March of 1991, I belong to the generation of leaders for whom the achievement of democracy was the defining challenge. Trends remain encouraging as young people empowered by education and technology demand their rights to be heard and to be listened to. Africa's evolution illustrates the strong causal effects between democracy and development. Afrobarometer finds that 7 out of 10 Africans believe democracy is preferable to all other forms of government. A number of countries, so many of our countries on the continent, including Ghana, Gambia, Senegal, Nigeria, Benin, Malawi, Botswana, Namibia, Kenya, Lesotho, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, all have conducted free and fair elections belonging to a peaceful transition of power. And within democracies, political parties are self-correcting, as recently witnessed in South Africa. We also celebrate Sierra Leone, Liberia's neighbor, who this month completed a hotly contested presidential election. Like Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria, the incumbent political power ceded power peacefully to the opposition. Still, Africa's progress is filled with imperfections, and too many nations lag behind. Several continue to practice managed democracy, void of real competition. Others cling to power for decades, deaf to the cries of their population for change, and too often, there's a violent rejection of election results. Political parties are organized by patronage and patriarchy. For most of them, democracy is practiced during the campaign cycle, but not necessarily within the party itself. This historical inequity is reinforced by a lack of campaign finance laws, which disproportionately prevent women and youth, two already disadvantaged groups, from taking on leadership role in political discourse, leaving the party apparatus to well-established economic and political cartels. In Africa, we tend to focus on elections, celebrate them as the milestone, but it is often said, elections do not a democracy make. We must look behind the process and examine the barriers that shut down competition before the campaign starts. Notwithstanding, I am convinced that these tendencies will not last, that our continent and other continents will continue the unstoppable march toward participatory democracy. We must identify the barriers to entry in political society and break them down one by one. Democracy must evolve from a single event into the institutionalization of a process that provides access to all its participants. We must look anew, not just as respecting constitutional term limits, but adjusting our Constitution to address campaign finance laws, to encourage the participation of women and the engagement of youth, and to strengthen the civil society. One cannot talk about democracy in Africa without noting the challenge of institutional and systemic corruption, an ill that fights back, often with an overpowering resistance of strength. I'm looking forward, I think Ngozi is here, to reading her latest book, in which she said, "Fighting corruption is dangerous. Rent-saving behavior becomes part of a survival skill and a corridor for greed. In response, we invested in integrity institutions and sought to hold officials responsible for the misuse of public funds. But sustainable change requires shifting the mentality of society and demands the ongoing collective effort of all branches of government across successive administrations. This is a challenge in our country that the administration of President George Weah will have to face and has committed to address. The good news is that corruption struggles to remain hidden in a world where technology and information systems increasingly showcase what passes from hand to hand, and social media has empowered everyday citizens to become watchdogs. Corruption, however, is also a double-edged sword and can be used against the innocent to discredit and disempower them. I'm delighted that after 4 years, the former president of Malawi, my dear friend Joyce Banda, is returning home tomorrow. I'm convinced that with the courage to return, the rule of law will prevail and grant her justice. We must tackle the historical disadvantages which have made women political outsiders. I made history as the first woman democratically elected to lead an African nation. But 13 years later, there is not a single woman president on the continent. That is not okay. We must dig deep to address the societal, educational, and institutional barriers which disadvantage women. Again, we can learn from each other. And we look, as an example, Rwanda, which has excelled in every way, where quotas were constitutionally imposed to address historical inequities, and where, as a result, with the role played by women, today, Rwanda is the model African country to be followed. We must capture the political energy of our youth, open up the political system, and lower the age of political participation. I'm sure that many of you have watched the sit-ins in Nigeria as the population mobilizes to reduce the age to participate in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and even the presidency in the aptly titled "Not Too Young to Run" campaign. And finally, toward the focal point of this conference, strengthening civil society. What can we do to inculcate a mentality of service with our young people, to create institutions that attract the best and the brightest and reward those who enter? What innovative programs can be established to build capacity and instill values, given severe limitations in resources? When I assumed the presidency, we knew Liberia needed a professional civil service in order to thrive. But traditional mistrust, a legacy of corruption, meant that few talented candidates wanted to work in the public service. A bloated and largely unqualified public service distrustful of change posed a threat to the fragile peace. So we immediately recruited a small but talented cohort of Liberians responsible for 3 important objectives: create programs to attract talented civil service candidates from other sectors, develop training programs to build the skills in existing civil servants, strengthen the Liberian financial backbone by investing in the Ministry of Finance human capacity. With support from international partners, we introduced a repatriation initiative that brought talented Liberians home from the diaspora. We launched an innovative mentoring program to recruit and train young leaders through the President's Young Professional Program. We created a merit-based competitive path to government. Today, over 140 young leaders having gone through this process could be the bulwark of a modern and efficient civil service. While we live in an uncertain world, I, for one, remain optimistic because from Africa to America, the future is in the hands of young people. They are taking charge and demanding that their voices be heard. They too are restless and impatient. They too are determined. Recently, while in the United States, a young student at Georgetown University shared with me a twist on the famous Serenity Prayer written by the American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. He said, "Madam President, our generation is different. We are no longer asking God for the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. We are asking God and the Almighty to give us the courage to change the things we cannot accept." In closing, I can tell you that this restless soul cannot rest, will not rest, as there is still much work to do. One girl child to educate, one young boy to employ, one market woman to do literacy training, and so the work goes on. I will be working with a small team to establish the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center for Women in Development. The center programs will be designed to support women as agents of change, makers of peace, and drivers of progress. In addition, I will remain committed to supporting the goals set forth by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and to its mission to promote governance and leadership across the continent. God bless all of you in this gathering today, gathering here to support the remarkable endeavor that is the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. God bless the people who chose a life in service to others. The future are in your hands. I would like to thank all of those in this room and those beyond who have been with me on this long journey. Allow me to give special thanks to Mary Robinson and to Alassane Ouattara. To President Ouattara for encouragement and guidance over many years, long years before I became president. I was told when granted the prize and discussion about coming to be able to give a speech. And I said this to Mo this afternoon. when someone said to me, this is the one opportunity you will have to say the things you always wanted to say but could not say. Tonight, I hope that my words, based on my experience in a small, poor, post-conflict country, will resonate, and that all of us who work for the betterment of society will leave here tonight strengthened in our conviction, with the courage to continue to promote good governance and democracy across the world. I thank you.